Today we dive back into the past and examine something that most people might recognize now, but won't recognize the old version of it. Welcome to the HolmFront. Watch it for a second. Hello, welcome to the weekend. I'm Tyler, your host, and to my right, as always, is my overly artistic friend, Mitch. Mitch, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
You'll have to forgive the low energy today. I'm going to try and keep it up, considering I think I'm running on 6 hours of sleep, maybe a little bit less.
And it's
No, it's probably less. It's probably less. I got up at like 7. I got up at 7, but I went to bed at 2.
Oof. And it's also like 1 in.the.morning over here, so pretty rough.
It's not 1 a.m. at all.
They don't have to know that.
Okay. Not to mention, we just got finished filming something for your channel.
We did.
I don't know how much you want to reveal. I'm just saying.
The
weekend was busy.
That was it was the Oscarina ceremony. So for my award show, talking about video games, we filmed it. So all the winners have been recorded internally, and so I've edited the first draft of the video. I just need to put in like some gameplay footage to intersperse it, so it's a little more interesting. But yeah, you should be able to see that this Saturday. In fact, as of the time of you watching this, it's probably already done and going to go live shortly. So
well, this will be on Thursday, and then the following Saturday will be your video. So
yeah, I just meant my work of editing will be done.
Yeah. All the torment you're putting yourself through right now.
I am quite exhausted. So
same. Yeah, it's been a lot of work. I'm actually going on vacation tomorrow. Which is one of the reasons you're here, is take me to the airport so graciously.
At like 4 a.m. It's gonna be bad.
Yep, love you. So, so we just watched a movie. This is a new episode of Rotten Disparities, which we haven't done in a minute. What did we watch?
We watched Dune.
Whoa,
the good one.
It was a great movie. Yeah, I really enjoyed Denise's take on the source material.
Yes,
but we didn't watch Denise's take.
No, we didn't. We watched the David Lynch film from 1984.
1984.
We thought it'd be fun to go back and revisit that one because there's been some interesting talk about that movie.
Yeah, and I thought, considering October was more of like a horror movie theme, I was kind of delving into what I wanted to do for November, and I just figured, why don't we just do a bunch of retro stuff? So.
Okay, I didn't know that. This is my first time hearing.
I'm kind of just deciding on the fly because we have a movie review coming up, and that's going to be retro as well. So I figured, let's just do the whole month retro.
Yeah.
So we got Dune today, Rotten Disparities. So before I jump into what the actual score is, unless you want me to show it first. I mean, I was going to ask what you would score it as, just off of your recent viewing of the thing.
Yeah. Hard movie to score.
Hard movie to watch.
Okay. I would give it 2 stars. But if I was going percentages, probably like a 65.
Okay.
It's really hard because actually a lot of things about this movie are really good, but there's like one thing that's not very good. And because that one thing is not very good, it doesn't work at all. So it's really hard because that one thing is the script.
Yes.
The script, and we'll talk about it more.
Some would say it's the most important aspect of a film.
Yeah, because he just, it's the whole book. You know, the newer Dune movies, it's 2 movies for 1 book. And they're both like 2.5 hours or something like that.
You know what I just read? Does he kill Jarmus in this movie?
No, Jarmus isn't in it.
Oh, okay.
He just
totally
him
forgot
out
about
entirely.
that guy. Screw that guy. He's out.
So, and that's like a prime example of like, he's like, I'm going to put the whole book in here. But then now Jarmus, like a crucial character who helps Paul become who he is just completely removed because there's not enough time.
No.
And that's really what it is. Because when it starts, it's a little rushed, but it doesn't feel too bad. And then once he gets into the scene where he's supposed to meet Jarmus, that's gone. and they just like welcome in instantly the Fremen dude. They're like, oh, you're gonna be known as Usul, and it's like you don't even know this guy.
You don't even know who the Fremen are yet. You're just like, okay. So before we continue, for the audience side, I think I would probably throw this in like, I'd probably drop it, probably like the 50% range.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, maybe a little bit lower. The thing is that I thought it was pretty charming in a bunch of different ways. It has a lot going for it. You can tell he was like passionate about the source material.
Yeah,
and it bleeds through. So there's enough there to like be entertaining. It's just a weird freaking movie. It is a mind trip.
Yeah, I like that though. That made it.
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, yeah. On some levels, that's good,
and it fits Dune because Dune is very cerebral.
Dune's very trippy. Okay, so then with that being said, should we jump into just this, see the Rotten Tomatoes score, and then let's go into what we like? Yeah.
So I'm with the audience.
So you're right. Oh yeah. So okay.
Exactly. Yeah. 60-65. I think audiences got it right. Like good movie, fairly accurate, but also like missing so many crucial things that it just it's hard to go above 65.
I wonder. Okay, so let me ask this then first.
Yeah.
Why 36? Mr. Representative of the critics.
Well, I mean, it's easier to explain the audience one, so I have the harder task.
No, that's my job though. So yeah, you get the hard one today.
Well, but the audience and I match, so I feel like you should describe critics this time. And
I can answer why the audiences think 65. You're gonna have to answer why the critics think that.
Okay, so
because I would have thought switched. This is very surprising. I would have thought that they would have been switched, just because this is such a technologically. Like it's ahead of its time in some of its shots.
Yeah,
it has a lot of special effects, and they're good looking special effects. Like it's a good looking movie.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I understand that they're probably critical of the script, just as we were.
Well, I don't want to this is maybe an unfair point. In fact, it is an unfair point, but I'm going to say it anyways, just because it might potentially be true. I think critics don't like sci-fi movies as much. I feel like I would need to do research to confirm, but if you're a movie critic going outside your genre, because it's not like movie critics are just, a collection of, only sci-fi viewers are going to watch the sci-fi movies and rate those. You watch other things, and it's not like you're going to get a whole wave of people that are anti-sci-fi watching it either. You're just going to get a weird hodgepodge of stuff. And this
sci-fi audiences are so weird.
They are weird, for one, but sci-fi movies are weird. Sci-fi movies will do things sci-fi movies are the one genre that is just completely indifferent to how the audience is or is not enjoying it. They're just like, here's this thing. Here's some weird slug monster who's teleporting us across the galaxy. You need to see it in all its grotesque detail. Why? Because it's in the book. It's part of the world. So now you're going to watch it. And just as an audience goer or a critic, you're looking at this going, why do I have this disgusting slug monster teleporting us?
That's what I say. Just more of that.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like when we talked about the Muppet guy.
Jim Henson?
Jim Henson, yeah. And how that there was kind of... Was there a disparity? The critics didn't like him as much as they should have.
It depends on the film that you're talking about. Most people like the Muppet films. But if you're looking into Labyrinth or Dark Crystal, then you have a bit more of a disparity.
Yeah, it's I know we shot that not too long
ago.
They
aged well. He was one
they did
that probably isn't received well in the beginning, but then as time goes on, the charm builds.
Yeah.
And I think probably the same could be said about the Dune film. I mean, this is my first time watching it all the way through.
Yeah.
Yours as well, I take it.
Yeah.
And we're both big fans of the Denis films.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love those movies.
Yeah, and I think we actually brought this up. I forget what episode that was, but we talked about how he didn't break the integrity of the first film trying to cram too much in there.
Yeah, that was one of the real strengths, is making it a two-parter, which was a big risk. And because again,
you don't know how that's going to be accepted. Because what if people hate the first half? Then you don't get a second movie and you don't get to finish the first book.
Right. I mean, can you imagine being a Hollywood producer and someone tells you, I got a guy who wants to make a Dune movie, and then you have flashbacks or maybe they're like panic attacks from the David Lynch movie.
Oh man,
And you're like, oh no,
I don't want to replicate this process or this result.
right, yeah, because it's super, like I said, cerebral,
Yeah.
very religious, spiritual. There's a lot of like transcendental moments, and it's just like, and I like all that stuff. And this is where I guess I disagree with maybe the regular critics, because I think critics at the end of the day, they want the heart of the story to come through for either entertainment value, but especially for like social commentary or things like that. And I want that stuff too. That's always a big priority, but I also just like cool, interesting filmmaking. And this is like a really interesting movie to watch. And if you compare it, this is probably like why I shouldn't be a critic maybe, is that my immediate comparisons was like Mystery Science Theater sci-fi movies.
Oh my gosh.
Because that's
it
it's
does
like
fall
it's
in
in
that
the
camp for
it
sure.
does, but this is like there's a real like integrity to this project that doesn't come through with those other movies. Like this has
in the
full
Mystery
on,
Science movie, yeah, not in the Denis films, because there's a lot of integrity there too.
yeah, but the David Lynch Dune movie, he does a lot of cool sequences where I'm like, wow, that was like, as weird as it was interesting that he put forth all that effort to see the slug monster navigating space to get us from one location to the next, which is not something that you would bother to do if you were making a Mystery Science Theater sci-fi movie. You wouldn't care. That would be too expensive. That would be a waste of time.
Right.
And so what you would do is, you repeat shots, you reuse sets, you have poorly constructed sets in the first place. You wouldn't do like cool POV shots that like he has in this. There's just so much stuff, like the whole like riding the worm sequence, gotta cut that, if they
cut
had
it anyway, to be fair.
Yeah, but I mean, at least he tried, and that's
Fair.
where like it kind of retains some. There's like a lot of goodwill behind this movie,
Yes.
and that comes through. And I feel like for your sci-fi movie, like this is not a movie that people who don't like sci-fi will enjoy. But if you like sci-fi, I feel like this is a movie you got to see at some point.
So do you think that's what did it for the critics though? Because I feel like that's an audience answer.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, I guess explain that to me a little bit.
Well, so if I'm looking at it from the audience perspective, the reason that scores higher is, for one, you're going to have primarily you're going to have the Dune fans going in there.
Yeah.
And they're all going to see the amount of effort that he put in to make sure that is as lore accurate as possible.
Right.
And how he just crammed everything in there.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a critic, I would think a critic would go in and be like, okay, I see that there's passion, but I also see that he was too passionate to where he totally sacrificed the script at the altar of it.
Yeah.
It's like, I want this to be a visual spectacle so much that it's fails as a narrative.
Yeah. Well, it did feel like when we were reading the critic responses, just the headlines, I mean, they had some pretty eloquent ways of describing this movie. But a lot of their criticism felt like it was boiling down to like a modern lens on some level, whereas this is just like a nice historical artifact. It's really cool to see.
It is, yes.
Yeah, it's cool to see a sci-fi movie that's not utter garbage from this era. I know that sounds terrible, but there's a lot of awful sci-fi movies from this time period, from like the 80s and 70s especially. So this is one that's a exception to that. Like, again, the script is not good. And I feel like critics do want to make sure that commentary, that like the purpose of the story comes through, and it doesn't come through at all. I mean, like Chani shows up and she has like 2 lines of dialogue and that's it.
Through the whole movie.
And they even had a chance to make her dialogue matter and then didn't use it. And it was like, okay.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because she's so integral to the whole plot.
Yeah.
And it's like, nah, whatever. Get out.
There's no time.
They've got too many people we got to meet. Get out.
Yeah, there's just no time.
And they pulled the opposite for her that they did with Arwen, because Arwen has 2 lines of dialogue in the book, but then in the movie they're like, no, this chick, we need a big part for this lady, so that we understand her development and how she affects Aragorn.
But
whereas
Arwen,
Chani, she has a whole section in the book, but they're like, okay, no, talk less.
That's a great comparison, because you're right. Arwen does facilitate Aragorn's character in a huge way, and he's like one of the main characters. So obviously, more screen time with Arwen is justified. But Chani needs it from the beginning.
You barely even get to know her name. She just kind of shows up, and they're like,
right,
all right, get out. Or take off. Every once in a while, they show them making out or something, and they're like, "Okay,
Yeah.
get off the screen."
Yeah. So so let me wrap up with this thought, and then I'm going to send it back to you to unpack the audiences, because I feel like it's hard to assess this movie just like in its time, and it's hard to assess it without already having the context of Dune. From like, I didn't read the book fully, but I've read portions of the book, and
Just the
then
first one.
the first one,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I've seen, the Denis films. So like now I know the story. So as I was watching through it, it felt like someone had taken Denis' movie and then did like a downgrade and then compressed it into one movie. That's what it felt like watching. So it wasn't like bad. It was just like the investment wasn't really. It's like I had to fill that in myself, but I know the Dune story, so it wasn't that hard to do. And like
Okay.
obviously that's not like that wouldn't really be fair to throw at it, because it's like, well, that's not the merits of the film. But at the same time, it kind of is, because everybody knows the context. I mean, like, films are never released in a vacuum. They're always released in the cultural context for which they exist. Like if they made another Back to the Future movie, obviously its comparisons are going to be with the previous Back to the Future films, and there will be a dialogue with that. So I feel like on some level, it's like David Lynch's Dune cannot be seen without now the context of Denis' film.
That's fair. Yeah, Dune is going to contrast to Dune. And I
Yeah.
mean, we struggled with how much we wanted to pull in Denis' films, because it's unfair, for one.
Yeah.
For two, it's just, is it necessary? Because we want to just,
Yeah.
the point of this is just to evaluate the film and the film's merits. And with the scores that it's given, we want to see why.
Yeah.
Why was it given those scores?
And so, yeah, tell me about that. Like, so why are you with the critics more on this one? Why is it so low?
Well, I don't like it much. It's
okay.
it's not a movie that, like, I mean, I've seen it. Cool. That's about it. That's all I want to give it. I don't want to watch it anymore. It's sorry, David Lynch. But no, I think this is like, and maybe that's the reason I'm not a hardcore Dune fan.
Okay.
I was glad that I read the book before I watched the film, because especially Denis' film, it helps add a lot of context, because like,
yeah.
Dune is nothing if not just an extremely long bit of world building. And like, I understand why that's difficult to adapt into a film,
Yeah.
because it's just so rich with all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I understand what David Lynch was trying to do. And, obviously Dune fans specifically are going to go watch this movie because they want to see it on the screen. And then they're going to see that David Lynch clearly looks like he's a fan.
Yeah.
And he really wants to make sure that it bleeds through on screen.
And
he does do a good job.
Yeah.
Like, it looks really good. The sets all look great. The cast is actually pretty well done.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jessica's like probably the weakest of the film.
It wasn't really her though, because
Right.
it's like it was just like how they set it up. Because you made a comment when we were watching it. You're like, are they trying to channel like something old school? Because
Yeah.
she has this like mental breakdown where she's like, ah, and she's totally doing like a 1950s hysterical woman thing. But then like in the next shot, she's like stoic, and
Yeah, she switches into Jessica.
And it was like, oh, okay. What was that for?
It does have a lot, especially in that first third. It has a lot of, I don't know, reminiscent themes and styles of an old school movie or an old school TV show. Like, it almost looks like a Twilight Zone, or
like
a
Star
Star
Trek.
Trek. Yeah,
I felt like it
early Star Trek. The first one.
Yeah, or somewhere between the original Star Trek and Next Generation. It kind of like slots in there.
Yeah, because it's in '84, so yeah, it is right in between both of them. But yeah, I mean, so it harkens back to a lot of that stuff, and there is charm in that. It decreased from Jessica's character, because I think Jessica's character is fairly compelling.
Yeah,
and her dynamic with Paul is really compelling. And in this one, she's just kind of the swooning, like, oh, it's so terrible. And it's just like, okay, come on, this is not like, stop it. And
then she does, and then you're like, well, how did she get from there to there? And then it just doesn't make sense.
So that's like the biggest crux. If we're gonna jump into where they have the problems, like, going back to the audience score, I think it's just that enough people, and especially now, it has developed a cult following. It's a really well-beloved film, and it showcases a lot of things that people want to see in a Dune movie.
Yeah.
Whereas Denis, I think his suffers from the fact that it doesn't have quite enough of the world pieces that everyone wants to see from Dune. He just hits the main parts that everyone knows, the worms and Paul Atreides and the houses and the politics of the thing.
Yeah.
He doesn't jump into like the Spacing Guild, and you don't see much of the Bene Gesserit. And, he shows enough to where it's compelling and it tells the story and it doesn't deviate from the narrative. But most people that know Dune know the entire book. And like he references things that he considers source material for Dune in the books, and it's these philosophical writings, and the princess is her writings and such, and then it references the other races and how they all interact with the world, and that doesn't bleed through with Denis' films. But I think he was trying to tell Paul's story specifically.
Yeah.
Whereas
we was trying to tell a story.
Yeah.
Because this one isn't really so much telling a story, it's just
showing
going through the
Dune.
motions and showing the world of Dune. Yeah, it's almost like you're this passive observer to all of these events. There's not a lot
of floating around Dune, and you're just like, you get to see these little bits and snippets. I mean, it is great. It looks fantastic. Like I said, it suffers from the script being super weak and sacrificing too much. Like, it's way too much world building and not enough anything else. Like, the character development's not there. The narrative isn't there. The plot points are all just kind of like scattered. They don't have like a build structure. They don't have a structure at all. It's just kind of like they kind of show up every once in a while and appear and disappear, appear and disappear. It suffers for that.
So question on that then. The world building, it's so much of that, but also it's not deep enough in the world building, would you say?
As in you don't get to understand too much, you just get to see it?
Yeah,
it's just kind of visually represented, like you were saying with the slug thing.
Oh, so you get to see the Spacing Guild slug navigate them through space, which is like cool, but it doesn't like matter.
Yeah, I mean, that one probably has the most substance to it because it actually shows you that it's like sending them to places or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
So that one you're like, okay, I get that one.
Yeah.
But then there's other instances, like for instance when they meet up with the Fremen.
Yeah,
you
get
have
to
no idea what's happening. They pop up, and then he's like, "You have a name. One's a secret name, and one's the one we call you in public." And you're like, "What? Why? What happened here?" Because in the film with the Denis film, and like I said, I try not to make too many comparisons, but just to show like what how the context matters, is that they show how he earns that.
And he has to earn their trust. I mean, but that's like any story of like, Dances with Wolves or, Avatar. It's like you gotta, they don't trust you because you're an outsider. That makes perfect sense. So you would have to learn their ways and everything. And this movie, he learned their ways in the span of like 5 seconds. I guess.
Not even. He didn't even learn them. They just kind of inducted him in immediately. And I think, I can't quite remember how faithful that is to the book, but obviously the book is
probably not.
It's like this thick. Like, I mean, he's got time. So anyway, it didn't introduce anybody properly. There's a lot of times you didn't even know people's names. Like you don't even know which one Stilgar is until like the end when it shows his face and it's like this guy is Stilgar. It's like, oh, cool.
Oh yeah, when it's doing the credit reel and it's just here's all the it's the cast of characters and it has like their portrait like show up in this background.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like the sea behind them, and they're like slightly transparent, so you can see their faces, but they wanted the sea behind it. It was like, why are you anyway?
It's like Lord of the Rings when Lord of the Rings ends, and it shows all these nice like hand drawn portraits of all the main cast.
Yes,
but like in that movie, you actually knew the main cast and their role in the movie,
and you knew their names. Yeah,
and like in this, it was like, who was this guy again?
Yeah, what did he do? Yeah, why do I care?
Wait, did he die? We never saw the end of him.
There was a lot of those. We were like, wait, who is that guy? Why?
Yeah.
Oh, he's a friend. Oh, okay. Right. Bummer. It's just so the main problem, and I think this is where and I hesitate to say this. Like, I understand that people like this movie, and I'm not trying to throw shade here or trying to say it, but I think that Denis did a better job of portraying the narrative and keeping it integral. Like, he had a chance to try and shove the entire first book into the movie, and he didn't, and that was the right choice.
Yeah.
David Lynch didn't do the same thing.
Well, I don't think he really had that opportunity, though. As I understand it, it was like a war between him and the producers for what they wanted out of the movie.
Fair.
But yeah, whoever it was, there clearly was not like a level of understanding that this is a kind of a big, heady, complicated project, and it's going to need a little more creative freedom. Because, when you look at Star Wars as a comparison, nobody believed in that project either. But the difference there is the storyline was actually quite simple. And, it had all these clearly defined archetypes.
Heavily influenced by Dune, by the way.
Yeah. But when you go to the Dune original source material, it's this extremely it's a very unusual story. It's a critique of the sort of story format as we know it in a lot of ways, because it's criticizing the hero's journey like as a concept. So because it's doing that, it just makes it. I think they're always going to be slightly strange movies, and I think it is to Denis' credit that he was able to explain clearly what that arc is about. And Lynch, I think, struggled to kind of commit to a message, because there's a lot of things from the book that he has to include, or he feels the need to include that probably shouldn't be there. Like in the book, you follow tons of different character POVs, and you get their inner thoughts all the time.
Right.
And in this, he was like, well, that was in the book, so I got to put it in the movie now. And so it's just like a still shot of someone, and they're like, wait a minute, are they suspicious of me?
This means that they're a traitor. We understood that. Thank you.
I wonder if he thinks that there's a relationship between the spice and the worms. Is there a relationship between the spice and the worms?
Exactly. Just handle it with the dialogue at that point. We don't need the inner thoughts and then for him to say what he was thinking. Yeah. I understand why he was doing it. He was trying to stay faithful to the source material, and people are going to appreciate that because well, that was in the book. We got it. Thank you. But he only does that because you can't see anything in the book. So
right.
You're eliminating that with film. Whatever.
Right.
Yeah. It again suffers from the problem of what is it that you adapt.
Yeah.
And then how much do you just rely on the audience being able to tell what you're trying to do with a visual medium?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it just kind of bleeds through as not insulting necessarily, but almost like he's trying to hold your hand too much.
Well, but it's such a complicated world to the uninformed. So, I firmly believe David Lynch would not make this movie in the same way if he were to make it today.
Potentially. But then again, he's going to watch Denis' film and be like, all right.
Well, never mind Denis' film, and never mind, it's the production quality is what it is for the time. I'm not holding that against it. But it's more just I feel like he would kind of go through the script a little differently, and I think he might be more tempered with some of that exposition because, I don't know, our context for stories is greater. And yeah, there's a lot of sci-fi back in the day that would just exposit to you, but maybe that's just because it was written by bad writers.
That's true. And there's a place for exposition on some level.
Yeah.
Star Wars does that. They have the opening crawl. But it became kind of a staple of what influenced it, and then it became its own staple.
But then it went away because, you pointed out, there's a good scene where I think it was Leto Atreides, where he's thinking about it's his inner thoughts. I can't remember what he was thinking, but he's walking down the hallway, remember? And then he's like, oh, wait a minute. He's like, that's strange. There must be a traitor in our midst or something like that. He starts to piece it together, and then that's when the bomb goes off, and then UA comes out and blasts him, and he's like, ugh. But that was a bit of dialogue where it was oh, that makes sense because there's no one to talk to. He's just by himself.
Oh yeah, so he's working through his thoughts.
Yeah.
Instead of telling you what's happening in the scene, it's actually how he's interpreting things, which is a lot better.
Yeah.
Than telling me what I'm seeing already. I got it. This is
a
visual medium for a reason.
He puts his hand in the box, and he's like, what's in the box? And she's all pain. And then she's like, you'll feel itching, and then you'll feel burning. It's burning the flesh off.
And then they show you.
And then they show you this cool visual effect of his hand
cool,
melting. And you're like, oh, that's nasty. And then she's like, it's just dripping the flesh off of it. And it's like, dude.
Yeah, we can see it. It's happening in front of me right now. I got it. Yeah, it was weird because you're just kind of what did you need to? Why did you need this on? Because you have them, and she actually says it in that scene. But then the most of it is voiceover stuff. So you've got to have someone
so it's like
go back
whether
and
it's inner
react
thoughts
the scenes.
or outwardly, it's just exposition up the wazoo in this movie.
Yeah, which is highly infuriating. And to me, it was like an anime.
Yeah, but I like anime.
Yeah,
So it didn't bother me that much.
I don't like anime. We'll get into that another day, I'm sure.
Okay, so some other interesting things about this movie is this is like a small comment, but like it seemed like everybody had an interesting accent, and it would have been fine if it was like, oh, well, this is the Fremen, so they're all going to talk in a certain way. But instead, it just felt like it was an arbitrary number of people.
Yeah.
So there was no like consistency, and like you could apply this in a more broad level too. Like visually, the people groups didn't look that different from each other, especially the Fremen. They just looked like Atreides people. The Harkonnen looked different, but they were just all gingers, and I don't know how that was
that
like
was weird.
justifiable. It was just like, what? Why is everybody?
I wonder if David Lynch is a ginger, and he's just like, they gotta look like me. They're my favorite. It was I mean, the Duke, I guess, was the most standoutish because he was all diseased or whatever it is. But otherwise, I mean, there wasn't like Denis was very specific about them looking very uniform.
Yeah.
But there was some serious what's the word I'm looking for? Discrepancies.
Yeah.
Because you have like Leto, who has a clear accent, and he cannot hide it. I don't know where he's from necessarily, and you can tell he's trying kinda.
Yeah.
But it still bleeds through, and it's like, because then Paul doesn't have an accent at all.
No.
Neither does Jessica. Well, Jessica has like the swooning, the like classic kind of thing going on, but not an actual accent, I suppose. But affectation.
Uh-huh.
But there's different parts of the world, and I mean, it doesn't matter necessarily. But even in the book, he references that there are languages. He doesn't like write it out or anything. He's not like Tolkien.
They did do that where there's this one scene where I think it was supposed to be a Spacing Guild person before they were transformed into a slug.
Yeah,
that's my guess.
Has, like, the translator thing.
Yeah, and he's speaking through a translator, and that was kind of cool that they threw that in there.
Yeah, that was
kind
neat.
of build. But again, it's like you're building the world, but all it does is say like, hey, there's like different languages in this universe. Anyways, moving on. And so you're like, okay,
but that's a bit of world building, right? I mean, that's something that like adds to what is possible in this world without necessarily having to do all the work of creating 5 different languages or whatever.
But there's no like context for like, or there's no like, it doesn't utilize it. It's basically like the antithesis of Chekhov's gun, where it's like, here, look, there's language barriers, but they don't matter. And it's like, okay, well, it's good to know that they're there, but they don't matter. I think that was the only time
that translator thing was used, right? He just comes in, says something real quick, and he's like, all right, I'm out. We're not showing this technology ever again in this movie. I'm like, all right, thanks. Cool.
Yeah, and there's other things, too. Like, if Paul is, being prescient and seeing the future and stuff, as he does a few times in this, I can imagine a lay person coming away from this movie in 1984 or whenever it was released and being like, how come he couldn't see all of this other stuff? Like, why was it so selective? Because I don't know that it really drew the comparison quite as clearly.
So you think that's a director's problem? Like, he wasn't providing enough context for you to understand.
The script, it's kind of like he has prescient, but like if you removed all of that, I kind of feel like the movie would still sort of work.
Yeah,
and
it
that's
didn't
not
seem
something
like it affected the story at all.
Yeah, and that's not something you should be able to say about most of the world building, but like you could say it for so much of it because it's just like crammed in there, but he doesn't have like the kind of execution to pull it off. And sometimes it's like, even in visual ways too. Like one of the things that just drove me crazy was that they were like firing like these blasters and stuff, but firing air quotes because sometimes you would see a projectile and other times you wouldn't. And the projectiles were not consistent either. So it was just like a roll of the die of what you might get. And I was like, why is this?
Because sometimes they'd do the whole and they committed. They were,
they're like,
but nothing happens. It doesn't like shoot at all, but then sometimes they do it and you'd see the laser come out and you're like, so what's the difference? Is there a difference? Like, what am I missing?
Yeah. Well, and it's weird too, because like he's teaching them the weirding or whatever, like the Bene Gesserit stuff, weirding ways. But the only thing he teaches them is how to say this word and fire a blaster simultaneously to create a devastating shot. which they didn't even need because you see them firing these like turret cannons into ships, like full-on ships that just implode from a single shot. I was like,
did you need anything else? Just use
like,
a bunch
why?
of those. Why don't you? Yeah, just arm everybody one of those, and you're good to go.
Yeah, instead they're like, no, we need the chaka-daka. And it was like, that's not necessary.
Is that the word? That's the word that they...
It was something like
that.
Yeah, they kept saying that. And then they also find out that Muad'Dib is also a killing word. He's like, oh, my name is a killing word too. And it's like, I thought yours was like the mouse thing, which is, they had that too. But then also it's a killing word, I guess. And then that was the theme with Johnny, because she says Muad'Dib and like fires, and I was like, nobody else says Muad'Dib and fires. That's interesting. What does that say about her?
I thought it was just a war cry at that point, but
yeah,
whatever.
But then she switches, and then she just goes back to or whatever it was, and it was like,
it's just gonna change every time we use it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna make up a new one.
I don't remember what they actually say. It didn't make much sense. It didn't add to the narrative. Even if it was in the book, which I don't recall necessarily, it just didn't seem like it was needed. Because you're like, you already have lasers in here.
It's more important that we know the plight of the Fremen,
right?
Than like the
which is
weird
also
tool
not
they're going to
clear
use
in here at all.
Right? Yeah,
and they're a third party. Well, I mean, I guess they're the most affected, but they're the natives to this planet,
right?
And the book is about the Harkonnen and the Atreides and their feud.
Right.
And then obviously the
Meanwhile,
Emperor being involved.
the Fremen are getting enslaved by the Harkonnen.
Right. Well, plus they're just kind of trapped in the middle of this war, so they're just being pinched. But none of that comes through at all. Yeah, you're just like, who are these people? Why are they?
But let's spend a couple of scenes showing off this laser blast, and then it's like, why do we need this? Cool, but why?
So.
Yeah.
And I think, so that was all the bad stuff. I was going to ask what your favorite effect was. I think I know your answer to this, but there was a lot of special effects in this film.
Well, my mind immediately goes to the most disgusting ones, because there were some pretty gross ones.
Yeah.
Which I appreciated was there. So there's like one where you see, what's her name? His sister. Aaliyah, yeah. So she's like in the womb, and there's like a shot of that.
Which Dune does that as well.
Yeah.
It's just not as visceral.
Yeah, his is more
Lynch
abstract.
Is
it's just kind of blackness, and then there's sort of a sphere. This is just like, here's flesh
Lynch
and
is
organs.
Like, how do you like your nightmares? Because I'm about to change them. It is rough. It's rough
nasty.
Visual material.
It's like, whoa. And there's like a baby in there like moving and stuff, and then it's like coming out, and you're like, oh.
Because it actually looks like a fetus in Denis' films. This one is like a fully developed child in like this red vat of blood, and it's like staring up at you. It's rough. I was like, my gosh.
There was another one where it's like, it was like partly a vision, but it's in there, and it just looked like, I can't even describe it, but it was like, it was the baby, and he was like, and it was like,
I was like,
it's just like,
is this Requiem for a Dream? Please stop.
I know, right?
It's something else.
And this was on the backs of like, it cuts to Giddy Prime, and they're like hosing down some weird like flesh or whatever down the drain, and you're like, ew, that was gross. And then like, it's the Baron and some other character walking down the stairs, and they have this Siamese cat.
It's Baron and Fade, yeah.
Baron and Fade. It's strapped up to this weird machine, and you're going, what are we doing with this?
These wires.
Yeah, what are we doing with this cat? And then I'm just going to go through this whole scene because it's just unbelievably weird. And then they go into the next room, and they got Thufir, or whatever his name is.
The human computer.
The human computer from the Atreides team. They've got him captured there. And then they did some weird surgery where they put this like valve on his heart, so if you pull it out, it'll just like squirt out a bunch of blood and he'll die. And I was like, that's disgusting and dark and kind of cool. I'm with that, but what are we doing with this cat? Well, apparently the Baron wants this guy to milk the cat in order to stay alive.
I was not expecting this at all.
It was the strangest thing to say. If I was there in the chair, I'd have been like, are you sure that's what you want?
Yeah,
I mean,
why?
You can ask for a lot of things. I'm just curious because it's an odd request from a villain.
I'm milking a cat. And the thing is, like, you don't understand why. This cat's like suspended in this cage.
Right.
And it's just this weird contraption. And clearly the cat does not like it. It's just kind of like trying to get out the whole time.
This poor cat.
Yeah, this actual cat that they brought on set. And then he's like, you got to milk this cat every day if you want to live. And it's like.
It sounds so surreal to even mention it, but that's what he said.
Yeah, you're like, this is such low stakes. Like,
what does this cat have to do with anything?
Is this going to hurt? Or, like, was this uncomfortable? What's wrong with this? Like, what?
It's so bizarre.
I don't think I'd mind milking a cat that much after the second or third time. Like,
right, you'll
weird.
get over it. Yeah.
It's just like not, it's not, I don't know, it's just weird.
It'd be like if you wanted me to, like, peel a gourd. It's like, I mean, I can do that. Oh, I don't know why you need a gourd peeled, though.
I suppose I could do that to save my life. Sure. It was odd. It just didn't seem like stakes that were worth it. Like at some point, you just feel like, I'm not gonna milk the cat. I don't care anymore. Just
give up.
I'm just like, no, I'm not doing this.
Well, how long can you milk this cat anyways?
Well, it's just funny, like how humiliating is this? Like, does this culture really have something against milking cats? I just don't understand. Like,
it's like, this is the worst offense we've given you.
Not the cat. No. Not the bees.
Yeah. No. I also think if eyes don't deceive me, there was like a rat strapped to the cat too, but not when they're walking down the stairs. I didn't see it then, but then there's like a close-up shot when it's in the room, and then there's like a rat there, and it didn't even seem like the cat was trying to get the rat. It was just like
the rat or the cat.
It was just like, hey man, we're in this together. We got to get out of here. And it was like, I know.
Probably so confused as to like what's going on. He's like, one day I'm just hanging out
confused
with my owner, and then I'm here in this weird cage. And now they're trying to milk me, and there's a rat. Like, I just want to go. I want to go home. I don't like this. I didn't sign this contract. It was so bizarre. You think like it was some method of torture or something. It didn't make sense. Like, you're just sitting there trying to figure out what this is supposed to mean.
Yeah.
And you can't let it go because you're like, what?
Very odd. I mean, to be fair, that was the strangest scene, I think, out of the whole movie. Right? I mean, what's worse?
There are some weird scenes. I don't know, Aaliyah like killing people and talking in the voice.
That was
pretty
just
strange.
Cool. She's like this 4-year-old who comes out and is like, "Don't leave, Baron," and you're like, "Oh," and then she like mind controls him and then like slits his throat and then like casts him out through.
He just floats off into some worm's mouth.
Yeah, it was like, wow, this is crazy. And then she uses the voice too. She's like, they got the voice down. You got to give it that.
The voice is good.
Yeah.
I thought that it was going to be a lot cheesier considering the time.
No, it was good.
But they did a great job.
Yeah.
I was very pleasantly surprised. So there's
You're going to talk about your favorite character now, aren't you?
I'm not sure which one you're referencing. I was actually going to mention just the weird little people in general.
I thought you was your favorite, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. She was great. It just was like, so there's a Fremen character that's introduced to Jessica, and she's
supposed to be the maid.
Yeah, she's introduced as like this lineup of locals essentially that are going to serve the House Atreides, and she's just kind of like wandering in between them
with this like really like intense face,
intense glare.
She was just like
in the book, I think she's got a crysknife, and that's like the introduction that Jessica has to the crysknife. But she's just kind of like peeking out between the people. It's very Gollum-esque. She's like, it's just weird. And you're like, is this person like a friend, or is she gonna kill someone? And then they have this interaction, and then she just takes off. She just runs out.
Yeah,
and you're like, all right. But then she shows up later. She like comes like,
and at this point, it's assumed that she is the maid,
right?
Okay, but then she talks, and
it is creepy.
It wasn't far from a Gollum voice. Just saying.
Like, oh. And they say, I'm a friend, and like, I don't think that's true. This does not feel like something a friend would do or say. It's because you said you're a friend. I think I trust you less now. Like, usually don't say it. You just kind of like, it's assumed just based on behavior. But I mean, whatever. Sure,
live under your mattress at night. Don't worry about me.
Crawls up out of a dark hole. Like, I'm good. Like, No, I don't think so. This does seem like something a good person would say. Jeez.
Yeah, that was interesting casting choice.
Yeah, well,
Going
even
back to
when
the-
she dies, she acts the same.
Yeah.
Golly.
Yeah, because she gets taken out by Dr. Yue.
Right. She's the one that Leto finds.
Right.
And that's literally, he like turns her over and she's like, ah! Oh my gosh. Yeah, so good. It just was just weird. It was very strange.
It's weird because it comes out of left field, right? The movie does a total tone shift. Like, the movie doesn't totally understand how intense this woman is. And you do.
Maybe he does. Maybe
viewer.
David Lynch is like, just leave it.
He probably was like, honestly, the more the
This is
better.
great,
Like, put
yeah.
on the voice.
Just
do it all
keep
the
her
more.
in the whole
Because she's
movie.
definitely put on a voice. That's not her ordinary voice. There's no way.
Don't know. I've never met the woman myself, so
I don't think so.
She
That
was
was
definitely
a
playing
lot.
it
That
up.
was intense.
it was, yeah. I mean, the director was probably just like, "This is great. I like this a lot." Which I mean begs the question because she's such a small part, and I mean she has a small part in the book too.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, I don't know. It was just like, man, you're really hyping this character up in this way. Why wouldn't you give her more screen time at this point? Let her run loose. But whatever. Yeah, it's just great though. It's memorable as all hell.
Yeah.
It was great. Yeah,
That was definitely a
Aaliyah is a
highlight.
close second for sure.
Yeah.
Just because,
She actually kept the seriousness in check,
right?
which is weird because she's 4 or however old she was in the movie.
Yeah, I can't remember, but I mean, she is creepy in the book too. Like I went, and
Okay.
I picked up my book and I was like looking through it, and I was like, oh yeah, she's born in the first movie. I forgot about that because Denis doesn't have her born. But
Yeah.
she has a lot of interactions. In this one, she actually like shows up as a child,
Mm-hmm.
and in the book, there's a line where, I think Jessica asks Paul, "Where's Aaliyah at?" And he's like, "Oh, she's out butchering the wounded so that we could collect the water."
Yeah.
I was like, whoa. But I mean, there's a scene in
Intense
the movie
character.
just kind of like that where she's like standing there with a knife, just kind of like, ah. I was like, oh my gosh, what's this character? Yeah, she just gets rid of the Duke. She like sends him out into
the Baron.
the Baron. And then she's
Mountain
like
Vortex.
talking creepy to the Bene Gesserit and stuff. And
Well, she's like interrupting the meeting with like, you have a Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother, you have
Right.
an Emperor and the Baron all in this conversation and a bunch of soldiers, and she just waltzes in all by herself, and they're like,
she's
"Who
got
is
a little
this?"
black cloak on. She's
Yeah,
like,
she's like stomping around.
little creepy child.
And then
Get
she's
out of
like-
here, Samara.
Yeah, and they're like, yeah, exactly. And they're like, "Oh, just get rid of her." And then she's like, "Don't you want to know who I am?" And it was like, "I'm not sure that I do now."
Not anymore. No, are you friends with the other one that was here before? You're the alter ego that came alive after she died.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
it is that way in the book because she's what the product of Jessica taking the the water of life while she's pregnant. And so Leah basically gains prescience that is far superior to even Paul's, and Paul is this like Messiah character. Anyway, I mean, not to delve too much into Dune, but Dune has a lot of these philosophical aspects and questions, and the question is like how far can you push before you playing God turns back and bites you in the butt?
Right.
And it's a very interesting question, and he embodies it really well through these arcs. And the first book apparently was supposed to have embodied the whole thing, and enough people didn't get it that he's like, I guess I got to make a sequel.
Yeah.
So then he made a sequel, and then he made a third book, and then I think he made 4, and then his son started writing a bunch.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's Dune. But so there's things in there that harken back to good things in the book that aren't fleshed out enough in the film for it to have the impact that it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem with the movie, is that you have this part and it's entertaining for what it is. It's just like, if you're just watching the film and you haven't read the book, and you don't have some nerd sitting next to you, like any Lord of the Rings fan that's just kind of like, hey, did you know?
Yeah.
He broke his toe when you kicked that? Like,
yeah,
if you don't have
exactly.
some Dune nerd that's there to like give you all this context, you're gonna be real confused with the David Lynch film. It's a trip of a movie. Like, unless you go and you take a bunch of drugs and then you watch it, like you might enjoy yourself. But otherwise, it is a strange film.
It's kind of like the movie is a visual aid while you're reading the book.
Yeah, you read along.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, pause, I gotta catch up. All right, cool. Keep going.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. If you've read the book and you get the context, I would almost suggest reading the first 3, or maybe even the first 2, so you can kind of get the concepts all together, and then watching this, because it is just the first book, but given the concepts of the world, the narrative all together, I don't know. Dune is a great series. I mean, I think I like it more than you do book wise, but.
Well, I had some trouble with the writing. I just felt like it. But I'm really hard to please when it comes to literature. It's like almost everything gets like a 1 star or a 2 star.
I'm hard to please with films, so.
Yeah, when it comes to like books, I like more classic, which is weird because this is like a classic, but
it is. It's 64, 65, something like that.
Yeah, there's just a number of things he does where like he kept spoiling his own story. And it was just driving me nuts.
Which David Lynch does, he follows through with all that exposition.
I can take it for like 2.5 hours. I can't take it for like the 13 hours that I have to read this book for.
Fair.
You know, he's like, let's interrupt the scene, go all the way over to Giddy Prime, and then they're like, we've got them fooled. And so they're like scheming. And then, you know, and you're reading it going, okay, so they're laying their trap. That's fine. The villains are scheming. I can deal with that. But then he's like, we have a traitor in their mix. I'm like, okay, revealing some of the surprises that are going to come later. And he's like, and you know who it is? Dr. Yue. And it's like, so there'll be nothing to the imagination.
None. No, you're going to learn all of it. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's just like the anime. Like, oh, man, if he uses his second sword, I would be hard-pressed to... It's like, just show me. Just do the fight. Like...
Well, the thing is like, if you're doing exposition, I feel it is the absolute worst in literature form because it's like, dude, like this is the longest, slowest version that you could do this. At least with others,
plenty of time, yeah.
You know, because like when you're watching an anime, like I get like the exposition is annoying, and sometimes it's annoying for me too. But also like there's cool visuals to go with it, so like you get something out of it. It's not just
you can make the same point for this movie. There's a bunch of cool visuals to go with their horrible exposition, but I mean,
yeah.
It does detract.
It does. Well, speaking of which, you asked me what my favorite visual was.
Yes.
And I think it's come back to me. So my favorite visual was the way they did the shields.
There it is.
Yeah. I liked that one.
It's so bad. Even by that standard. Like,
oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to back it up a little bit. On a purely technical level, it's interesting what they were doing because I'm sure at that time it was difficult to have something track the motion of the human body. And I mean, it is a series of rectangles, but for them to follow through with all the motion of the body,
yes,
couldn't have been an easy task. I mean, I don't know how they did it.
I know how they could have done it. So basically, you click the device and then it creates this cool visual effects on the screen where it's like, and that's putting up the shield, right?
And then you just have it
just stop
invisible.
there.
Yeah.
Now we know the shield is active until you tell us otherwise, and you do a all over again. But instead, they turn everybody into a Minecraft Steve character.
It does look like Minecraft. That's a good point.
And then they're like, and they do a full-on knife fight in this.
And it's
like, dude.
The thing is, they put this like, I don't know.
Don't do that.
It's like stained glass almost.
Yeah.
They distort the view inside of it, so you can see the people. Like you can see Paul and
but they're all like blurry and weird.
Yeah,
looking.
they're distorted. It looks like they're underwater or something.
Yeah,
and it's like so distracting because they just make it so bulky that especially when 2 of them are on the screen, it just takes up the whole thing.
Yeah, and it's just
so any movement that they're doing, I guess it's covering up bad choreography if there was any. But it's covering up anything that they're doing. So, like, thankfully, they didn't do that with him versus Frey.
Versus Fate. But why didn't they? Why didn't they use shields?
They should have done it on that one because that was really bad looking. But
well, no, but like in that fight, like you would think the characters in universe would use the shields. It's like shields just get forgotten about at some point.
To be fair, Denis didn't use it either. But that was the book. I mean, I think that was an actual that was a standard of that fight.
Oh, okay. Okay, that makes
representing sense. I mean, that I'm implying a little bit there because it's not necessarily explained.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, it's just kind of like ignored. And that was the only time that they used it in the film was like, yeah, this is the only time we're going to be able to do this, you guys. make it fun here. Just with this practice fight, none of the battles, none of the important parts. Like,
well, and it's interesting too because I had forgotten that in the Denis film, which we watched, just a portion of as well to kind of refresh some memory, and I'd completely forgotten that they don't use shields for that knife fight. But that's because the shields don't have like a huge like presence in the film. It's like they're subtle. So like, they're there, and when it's active, I recognize that and I'm conscious of it, but it's not something that like rips me out of the movie. And so like in this one, I couldn't forget it because I was like, oh, remember the Minecraft sequence? Are we bringing that back?
I mean,
Yeah.
It looks very much like what's that movie? Tron. It's very Tron-esque.
Okay.
Have you seen the original one?
I mean, no, actually I've not. But I've seen like clips of it. This looked way worse than that, I think. Unless Tron looked really bad. It would have had to look really, really bad.
We'll have to watch that one if we'll.
Okay.
Got a retro
That would be
series,
good to compare because
that's true.
It's a more noteworthy sci-fi film from this era.
Which one? Tron or Dune?
Tron. Not more so than Dune, but just like it's not a Mystery Science Theater movie. Remember, the standard is low.
I don't know. You'd have to see Tron. It's pretty rough.
Okay. I mean, lots of people love that movie, though, right?
Lots of people love Dune. Audience score should tell you.
Well, the audience score isn't exactly generous. 65% is not a glowing review.
No, but I mean, it's still
they like it. Yeah.
It's on the like upward portion of the scale. It's a failing grade, but it is on the positive end of it.
Yeah. Okay, so like I want to talk about my second favorite special effect though, and this is when he rides the worm.
Oh my god.
The way they decided to do this is they hand him a shovel.
Not good.
Which I already love it because they gave him a freaking shovel.
This is the slowest moving giant creature on screen. It's
slow.
Bad.
So he goes up to the side of the worm, just walks up to it.
Yeah, he kind of just saunters up there.
Yeah, because it's just riding the sand, so the sand's just like it's not like
it's like a 5 mile an hour monorail. It's just kind of like
yeah. So he waltzes up and then he like kind of jacks in the shovel into the side of the worm, and then like that pulls up its skin or whatever, which makes it roll over and it pulls him up to the top. And then once he's up there, he's got these two ropes, and then he's like walking around and he's like, all right, set this one up, chuck that one over the side. And he's got plenty of time. It's just a very leisure activity. And, they talk it up in the movie. It's not like they forgot this part. He's like, I'm going to have to tame the worm, the Shai-Hulud. It's going to be tough. It's going to be this final ultimate thing. Even though I've done no training, I'm going to do this, Fremen specific activity. So he pulls it off, and then like the other Fremen come up, they're like, yeah, that's cool. And then they climb up the rope, and then they're riding the worm with him. And
yeah, that was the weird part about it.
Yeah.
Like, let's all get on.
Yeah, they're just like running across it, like chilling. And yeah, it just sort of was like one of those things where it felt like it reminds me of like, so how many instances in this movie do you feel they were respecting the source material too much? Because it started to be at the detriment of the movie at some point. Because that wasn't a really believable scene.
No.
And I don't think we needed it. I honestly, if you pulled it out, like, yeah, I know, like, in terms of the Dune story, that's an important moment that we're losing. But so is the moment with Jarvis, and that's a scene you could have Jarmus, and that you could have pulled off better because you could have gotten a good actor and you could have written some good dialogue in theory, and then you could have done a competent knife fight in theory. But I mean, like, think about it. Like, you spent all this production for like this big worm scene, and it's like it accomplishes nothing because you didn't properly set up what it's supposed to mean to conquer this worm. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, because they don't even deal with a lot of the beliefs. He does a little bit in the beginning. Well, like the Denis film specifically, he like watches those vid tapes or whatever they call them. The holograms.
And they explain the sand walk and, which they didn't really
they
have
explain
in
what the worms are called and what the
Yeah.
significance to the Fremen is.
Yeah, why they matter.
In this film, you get none of that. It's
Right.
just kind of like that worms are out there but you don't know what significance they have or why the Fremen care or that they can even ride them. Like that's
Right. And then Paul has to tell us that
right.
it matters. And
And
then
he
he
has to
goes and
tell
does
us
it.
by jumping up on the worm as slowly as possible. And that was a weird scene because he's like, he gets the shovel in there, and then as it spins, he's just kind of holding on.
Yeah, he's just riding it
And
all
just
the way
kind of
up
like,
as it rolls.
yeah, he's just sitting there like, oh, well, I'll get to the top soon. I mean,
Yeah.
it's this huge worm. And then
Yeah.
there's like 100 other people that are like, all right, he's up. Let's all get on too.
Yeah.
And they all just kind of climb on up. It's very nonchalant. It doesn't feel like these things have any gravitas or they're not very feared. You know, in the Denis film, they were very, you know.
This is, it's an important moment.
Well, it's an agent of chaos. Like, if you could get near that worm, you don't know what's going to happen. You know that this could swallow you without even noticing.
It's a destructive force of nature, and you can see that just from, it's just from how the sheer scale of it. So, yeah. And I mean, like, he's up there, and it's like blowing sand in his face. I mean, it's a huge freaking worm. It's going to move fast. So that makes sense.
Not in this one. And I can get that he's, a lot more limited than Denis is, but I don't know. It just did not. He didn't do enough there to portray how it was important, not even contextually. And that's the problem, is that visually, whether you're limited or not, contextually, you also failed. So script was bad, direction was poor in just getting the narrative told.
Yeah.
With the shots and stuff, I mean, it looks really great. The set design was great. Production design was great. Music is actually not bad.
I actually really like the music. That, I think, bumped it up quite a bit for me because the music had a good sense for keeping scenes linked together with each other, and the sound as well, depending on like where you were. Like there was actually there was a good degree of control on the part of the audio engineers and the composer to make sure like, okay, this is a transitional moment, or oh, this is like a coming into focus moment, or oh, this is the tragedy moment. So it was all very subtle, though. It wasn't a very like if you go and listen to it, I don't think it's gonna like catch your attention too often, except for like the main theme, which I didn't. That was the one I didn't really care for.
There's a couple of songs that stand out, and I think it's Toto that does the music, which is a fun fact in my opinion. It's an odd decision, but it's kind of like the guys who did the Neutron film, whatever.
Daft Punk,
yeah. Just an interesting choice to do a soundtrack, but I mean they did a good job, so. They know their music, obviously.
Yeah, he kind of salvaged a lot of the scenes from, like, so you at least knew what you were supposed to get out of it, even if you didn't feel it. You, like, understood what it was. So.
Fair. Well, do you have anything else that you want to point out about the film? Like any other gripes or praise or anything else?
No, I mean, I think it covers most of them.
Would you recommend it?
I think if you like
to select people.
Yeah, I mean if you like old sci-fi movies, I definitely would recommend. I think if you like Dune at all in any way, it's definitely worth a watch. I think there's some nuggets in here that are worth experiencing. And like, part of it too, like he does do an admirable job of trying to tell the story. It's definitely in the attempt range more than the actual delivery. But like certain things you got to give him some credit for, like, the amount of grotesque stuff that's in it, or like some of the killings, like some of the characters who gets killed, like one guy gets like a knife stabbed up his throat and you're like, oh geez, that was nasty. But he actually commits to those, which I appreciated. And what kind of hurt it though is there were some instances where he kind of was sabotaging himself. Like during the big battle, you got the Harkonnen who are all in hazmat suits, just these black spray painted hazmat suits, and they're just chucking people. That's all they did.
Someone runs by and they just grab them and throw them in the air. And you're like,
classic 60s Star Trek move, just like and then boom, and then they fall over and then throw them, and then they just jump, and then you'll do like the low angle shot of someone like jumping over the camera, and then like another shot of them like landing somewhere.
Very classic.
Yeah, it was like a lot of that kind of stuff.
Worst ways.
Well, and you brought up that point, and I wonder if you have any other thoughts on it. That you said it felt very classical, and you were wondering how much of that was intentional. Like, maybe tell me more about that. Like, did you feel that was what he was doing?
I don't know enough about David Lynch.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and it's 1984. I mean, there were still a lot of that melodrama that's just kind of bled through. So I don't know.
What year was Terminator?
Which one? The first
The
one?
first one. Is that 87?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Because I kind of wonder, because that was like the first sci-fi film that came to mind as something that would, because Terminator, I think set a very clear tone of how you could do sci-fi movies.
Also 84.
84. Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, the first one.
Yeah, I thought it was 84. I just wasn't confident in that
So
number.
yeah, same year. That one is a lot less
bad.
Well, that too. But I mean, you're not on another series of planets, and I mean, you're dealing with just the.
Oh, it's way more focused. Yeah.
Oh, a lot less like special effects heavy, and a lot less pure, unfiltered sci-fi. So I mean,
yeah,
hard comparison. But I mean, yes, narratively, it is a lot tighter. It's a lot better, more well designed, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, again, remembering what you're trying to do with it, because Terminator is representative of the grungy, we just got out of the 70s and it sucked and we're still pissed off, and this Dune movie is like, all right, let's get spiritual and weird and psychedelics, and it's like, dream sequences and prescience and inner thoughts. It was an incredibly like self-reflective film. It was super introspective, just like in the mind. That's what I kept thinking when I was watching the movie, is that very rarely would step out of that and give us just like a regular scene in a regular movie. It was just so like twirly in here, which made it interesting.
If
different.
That's the word we want to use, yeah.
I don't know about good,
like
but
I
different.
said, it's a trip. It's a trip of a movie. It's a strange one.
It definitely wasn't anywhere near as bad as something like Megapolis, though, a movie that just makes no sense whatsoever. Like this one at least has the source material. If you're familiar with that, it's going to make sense. And I think it would probably make more or less sense without the source material, but the emotional impact is gone. That's what gets lost. Because at the end, they're like, Paul is like this thing, this Kwisatz Haderach
and
thing.
And you're like, what the hell is that?
And then it ends.
Yay. Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, it's that context missing.
Yeah.
And therefore, the impact's gone.
Yeah.
Because you didn't build up to anything. You have no idea what you're looking at. You just know, okay, what is a Kwisatz Haderach? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And so, anyway.
What's the one thing you would want from this movie to give it like a better score?
Narrative.
Just like the writing?
Yeah.
But like when you say the writing needs to be better, what do you want specifically? Because I mean, it's like a multifaceted problem, right? Like if he starts cutting things out, the story is going to start making less sense. But he needs it to make sense.
I would just cut it in half.
Just cut it in half. Just do the first half of the book, and then just like, I'll be
do
damned if I don't get a sequel.
You either do what Denis did, or I mean, you have to be a better writer in order to fit it all, and you can't fit it all in a movie unless you can make it like 12 hours long. So,
and there's no way they were going to okay that.
Yeah, so I would just cut it in half. I don't think there's anything else you can do. There's too much stuff. And that's the problem with Dune, is that he did what he shouldn't have done and just crammed it all in there, and so none of it made sense.
Do you think they would have let him do that at the time, though?
Do what?
Cut it in half, do 2 movies?
I don't know enough about the corporate sphere, especially back then.
I kind of doubt it.
Yeah, probably. I mean...
But they were liking sequels at the time, so it's possible. They would have had to gamble that this is going to be a huge hit, and I do kind of understand where producers would be coming from, because even though we have the success of Star Wars, it's like, look, I can have an open mind, but Dune is weird. Dune is weird for a sci-fi, and it's
less
weird
straightforward. It is not. It has an established fan base, whereas Star Wars built its fan base. So, like, when you're trying to appease someone who already have expectations, you're already working uphill, which I think lends to the fact that he should not have done it this way. It should, I mean, even on a corporate level, they should know, like, this is a stupid idea. We're going to shoot ourselves in the foot if we do it this way.
Yeah.
I don't know if that decision, like, works its way through their mind in a logical way, but I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much interference there was, so I don't know what limitations he was exposed to on the outside of it. I just know that, like, artistically, this fell flat.
Yeah.
Just because it's visually stimulating doesn't mean that you have any merit. I mean, like it's
Well,
good.
the music.
Yeah. No,
Production
I mean,
design.
there's elements of it that have merit, but
Yeah.
as a project, as a whole, like
Yeah.
it's missing the key component. So I mean, how much like, and the problem with that key component is that you already have a map. You have the book, and
Yeah.
so if you have to deviate
That's
from the
fair.
book, then you should be questioning yourself as to, like, should I be doing this then? And that's why I appreciate what Denis did, because instead of kowtowing and saying, well, I'm going to try and just put it all into the only movie that I have guaranteed to me, I'm going to make sure that I appease the people that are going to come and see this movie, which are Dune fans, like, primarily.
Yeah.
And enough people are going to come because Denis making it, and Denis had a pretty good name at that point, but Dune fans it's going to succeed or fail based on that fan base.
Well, he did give it much broader appeal than his other movies because it was, it was rated PG-13 instead of rated R, and then it had, actors like Zendaya and what's his name?
Jason Momoa.
So some popular big name actors in there. So he was kind of dressing it up for like a larger audience, and I'm sure that was
No, I
in
mean, I
large
get what
part
he's doing,
because
but he didn't sacrifice the source material. He didn't have enough in there, I think, to appease the, like, diehards.
yeah,
You're gonna have where's this Kate Spacing Guild and all that kind of stuff, and you're going to hear that.
right.
You're gonna oh, Leah's supposed to be
But
born.
like the integrity of the story comes through, and I guess that's where the question lies: is that like it almost feels like the Lynch movie is so accurate to like what happened that it just forgets about the why, and it just completely
Maybe.
drops that
I think
part.
he just pulls too many abstract concepts from the book and forgets that it has to surround a narrative. And so all the abstractness is there, but none of the through lines that a general audience would like. So again, I don't know what influenced all those decisions. I just know that this is not the way I would have made it had I had control of doing so. So
I might have made it like this.
I mean, Dune's a weird project. I mean, it's a weird property.
I definitely would have cut all the inner dialogue. All of that would have gone.
I would have put more. Just like the whole movie would be.
I mean, you could do the whole thing that way and no actual dialogue.
It would just
that's
a
one way
stream
to
of
do it.
consciousness from Paul. Like that's all I would do.
Oh, yeah. Kind of like how it starts with
Oh yeah, dude, that was so weird.
It starts with so it's the daughter of the
emperor, yeah.
So it's the princess. So it's like a space background, and then like her face appears, and then she's like recapping like important like context for the world of Dune, like what is spice and where does it come from and stuff like that. But then as she's saying this,
all stuff you should learn from watching the movie,
which you do learn throughout watching the movie. But yes, anyway, so she's explaining that, and then she ends on like what seems like a final note, and then she disappears, and then she comes back in,
and she's like, "Oh right, I forgot."
I forgot.
What do you mean you forgot? Like, so are we breaking the fourth wall, or are you just providing some exposition? Because there's a difference.
Right.
Is this Deadpool or is this Star Wars? Like, is this the opening crawl, or are you talking to me as the movie watcher?
Yeah.
And they treated it like she was talking to you. She's like, "Oh yeah, before I go." It's like, what do you mean before you go? It's like, what do you mean you forgot? This is a script. What are you talking about? It was just odd.
It's so strange.
But that set the tone, I guess. Did a good job of like making sure that you knew what was coming.
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, we were like, oh man, there's gonna be a lot of this, isn't it? It's like Galadriel in the beginning of Lord of the Rings, except if Galadriel like showed up on the screen, was like, hey everyone, you're watching Lord of the Rings. Like,
yeah, she's like, and for 2,500 years, or was it 2 3/4?
Yeah, like. This should be scripted out. Like, why are you confused? Why are you having trouble with your details? Like, take two. Yeah, it was odd.
And
odd
it abandoned Gollum, if you will.
That's a metaphor. But this
it's like a non-committal narrator. They don't want to be too biased here.
Yeah.
Even I don't though we're counting on them.
I don't want to sound too formal here. I want to sound like I'm actually telling a story to my friends. It was a weird decision. It was one of those things you're like, why didn't anyone go, yeah, don't do that?
I don't know. That was an odd one.
Cut that bit out. Whatever. It's the first of many problems in that.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
I don't think so. I think it is worth. I read the books first, but it's worth a watch.
Yeah.
It's gonna trip you out, but it's worth a watch, and then just go watch the Denis films,
or just watch those twice,
or 4 times. I mean, I saw the second one in theaters 4 times, so
yeah, I saw it 6, I think.
Yep.
Yeah,
worth watching. So
I just saw it and seen this one twice in the theaters.
I don't think we're gonna see it twice ever. So I don't intend to watching it again. But
I could be coerced into watching it again.
if I were to do some MST3K thing, then I could probably be considering. But that's the only way I would do it.
You genuinely could, but that doesn't take away from the good stuff in this movie.
I didn't. I mean, I gave plenty of praise.
Yeah.
It just
no, you're right. It
wasn't one of those that had that thing. Like Dune 2, I could watch every day. I mean, it's such a good movie. And Dune 1 actually too, probably, but it just has so many things going for it that it's just it bleeds charm.
The investment is really there, and this one, the investment is
Right.
really hard because you have to be invested in the world, and that's kind of where I'm at with it, because I like sci-fi and I like the world of Dune, so it was pretty easy to just get involved.
Sure.
For me, but and it's so visually interesting with all the effects and sequences that they put together, so it's kind of cool to see all of that come into fruition. But yeah, it's the emotional resonance. Yeah, no, that's totally not a thing. Not existent. Yes.
Well, with that, I think we'll call it there.
Yeah.
It's getting pretty late, and we're gonna be up early. This is that episode that's gonna be here while I'm on vacation. So, I hope you guys have a good weekend, because I will. And thank you for watching. Have a good night.